I'm going to give a presentation. It's work that we've been, I suppose, trying to progress over the last number of years. It's SuDS. It's not the bubbly stuff. It's about engaging, I suppose, nature-based solutions with water underpinning the whole lot. So it's a challenge. So I guess we better bring ourselves back from the future in the Netherlands to the present and the current in Ireland. And we're starting from a very low base. But look, there's lots of opportunities, and I'll go through that. And hopefully, I can present this, some practical, I suppose, practical stuff that we can actually do collectively, okay? So just as an overview, I'll just talk about very briefly water and urbanisation. This ties in with the Water Framework Directive. Andy mentioned some of the initiatives there earlier on before the break. Water Framework Directive, big directive. It's a cool directive, really, in terms of it came from a very democratic process. Basically, everybody's got the right to water in Europe, and a lot of stuff flows from that. And if you think about nature, most biodiversity is water dependent. So I'm going to be focusing more on biodiversity that either lives in water or is very closely associated with it. I'll briefly touch on the water quality impacts, and then some of the talks we're talking about. I won't talk about green roofs. That's a whole other presentation. But just to say, now that we're in Limerick, green roofs are an option for buildings. Okay, I'll just leave it at that. What we can do in terms of local authorities and also collectively as society, this can't be done alone. It has to be a multifunctional approach. And then from our point of view, and what we're trying to do with the River Basin Management Plan to try and get this whole thing moving. So there's quite a few faces in this room which I would have drawn from inspiration and information from. So I just want to acknowledge that, who do sit on the Water Framework Directive governance committees, and that's where a lot of this comes from. So this is Clonmel, where I'm based. The River Shore, it's an SAC. A lot of our SACs, river and SACs, have some really cool stuff internationally, a lot of very important species. And I guess the point I'm making is that streams flowing through these urban areas, if they are polluted, will impact on the biodiversity locally and also in terms of the SAC itself. The Water Framework Directive and the River Basin Management Plan, which runs in a 6-year cycle, urban runoff is one of the pressures that's increasing. So if you look at the map there, it doesn't look significant when you compare it to agriculture, but it is significant when you look at it at the local scale. And what are we talking about? We're talking about rainwater when it hits the surface of the ground, hard paving, roads, etc. And what happens to it then? Especially after a dry spell, you have a lot of grit, a lot of muck. Think about the rubber on the tires of your cars. Where did it go? Why do you have to replace your tires? Where does that rubber go? Your brake fluids, exhaust pipes, etc. Where's all the hydrocarbons go? If it's not treated, it's going to go straight into your receptor, into your water body. The traditional way of dealing with this in Ireland, and still to some degree, is stuff the water underground, into a gully, down the shore, out of sight, out of mind. The problem with that is you're not treating the water, you're not dealing with the flood risk elements, you're not adapting for climate, and in terms of biodiversity, absolutely zero value, and that water is contaminated often and heads off into the into networks. So here, Waterford City, I put up the slide especially for Bernadette Guest. You can see here water quality in the city here is not doing very well at all. All those colours should be either blue or green. So this is just typical of any town in Ireland where you have these small water bodies that are contaminated or have misconnections or they have combined sewer networks. So what we're trying to do is, I suppose, pull the water out from those systems. The more you pave hard surface, the less infiltration you're going to have. So greenfield site, you'll have a lot of infiltration. In an urban area, it reverses. So most of the water is going to run off the paving, untreated, unintercepted. So if you have combined sewer networks, which we do have in a lot of our towns, particularly in the town centres, well then the treatment plant can become inundated or just bypass the treatment plant and you get sewage coming straight into the receptor. So this is a problem for Irish water. A lot of these networks are old, and to try and dig them up is a challenge, but we have an opportunity here, and I'm going to get to that in a minute. In terms of toxins and what comes in, we don't even measure for half the stuff. That's the reality. I'm stuck in the middle of the Water Framework Directive. We talk about phosphates, we talk about nitrates. We're not talking about often the really nasty stuff like your polyaromatic hydrocarbons, your heavy metals, etc., etc. So there's a whole lot of stuff that comes off, particularly vehicle traffic. Work in the States. There's some very interesting scientific papers on this where they're extremely defended this I suppose, cocktail of toxins can be very, very toxic. And over in the Pacific coast, they found that surface water was wiping out the coho salmon. Now, we don't have coho salmon here, but the point is that, clearly invertebrates, aquatic organisms are sensitive, or some are sensitive to what's coming off these hard surfaces. And here's a simple, small example here in Ireland. This is the Clashawley River, River Shore, SAC for crayfish. Julian Reynolds, I put a slide in for you, leading expert in crayfish in Ireland. This is a very important site for crayfish internationally. I don't know if you're aware that we had a crayfish plague there a number of years ago. It's still burning through the system, but there's crayfish in this particular stretch of the river. However, this is what the river looked like in 2019. River flow is low, heavy cloudburst event, and that's all runoff from the hard surfaces in there. So that's a real photograph. It's from fisheries, and that is not a good situation. Another example here, this is down in Wexford, where I'm from. I just took this photograph during the last heavy rains. This is going into the SPA. That's draining a road, the main road heading the Enniscorthy Road there, and you can see that pipe and what's discharging. And I couldn't get the entire SuDS line there, but they're not aeration, they're SuDS. That's actually probably from the car washing. That's going in there. Again, it's not intercepted at all, straight in. And that pipe is dry normally, and then it discharges. Very important area for sea bass, as well as it being a protected area. So what are we talking about in terms of SuDS? Nature-based SuDS is what we're trying to promote. There is SuDS, and explain that in a second, but basically what we're looking at is in terms of water quality, in terms of water quantity, in terms of amenity, and in terms of biodiversity. If you do all of those things, we're bringing in multiple benefits for society, so it's not just about one or the other, but water does underpin it, and it's really important that we think about water when we're designing all this green and blue infrastructure. And now climate, of course. So in terms of, we're looking at changing climate patterns, changing precipitation, we have to start thinking about where the water is going to go, and also during dry events, if you hold the water back, allow it mimic what would be natural in, say, a bog in the countryside, slow release of water, okay? What is sustainable urban? What is SuDS? Sustainable urban drainage systems. So these are basically systems that engineers use to slow the water off, coming off hard surfaces from the roofs, from the paving, so that you don't get a massive big flood event coming off the urban areas. The more you urbanize, the bigger the city, the bigger the problem. And what we're looking for is a nature-based approach, as opposed to, as I said, stuffing the water underground. You can attenuate water underground, but there's no benefits, and they tend to block up, not maintained. So this schematic here is from the OPW guideline there back in 2009. If you look at the images there on the right, we're talking about green roofs, we're talking about bioretention, we're talking about swales, we're talking about ponds, a whole range of stuff in there. And really look at the cityscape. When the water starts hitting the ground, where does the water go? So we don't want to be going to the gullies. We want to start going through treatment systems like rain gardens and that. They can pull out most of the heavy metals, for example, up to 90%, depending on the metal. They can pull out nearly all the suspended solids. They can take out a huge amount of the hydrocarbons, as well as the, what have I left out? Nutrients as well. And we need to be doing this in a kind of a planning, in an overall coherent plan. So rather than just plonking on a small rain garden here or there, we need to start looking at our urban areas in terms of an overall rainwater management plan. Where does the water want to go? Where does water want to go? And then design our buildings around that. So it goes right back to Katie's presentation there. So that's the ambition. This is the reality, okay? So here's an example of one of the SuDS. This is one which doesn't do benefit for nature, but it shows the principles. This is one from Dublin, sent by by Connor, a colleague. You can see here the top one there. This is a fairly new development. You can see where the waters come in. The graph there is the rainwater at the where was that? Phoenix Park from Met Éireann, and you can see about 30 mils of rain came in over a very short period of time there on the 4th to the 9th. That pond filled up, it's an attenuation pond, and then it's dry the following day. And you can see where that pond is located in the park, so it's part of a kind of an amenity area. Now, it's not huge in terms of biodiversity function, but it will provide benefits to the stream that flows through, because it's slowing down the water and mimicking a more natural environment. This has been looked at by the OPW in terms of regional scale management and the local authorities in terms of holding water back, so it kind of ties more into flood risk. Traditional SuDS that we use in Ireland tends to be more of a kind of a grey infrastructure. You can see here the honeycombs here on the Tipperary Carrick Park. It works well. You can see there, heavy shower rain, it's dissolving in there, but it's not providing that nature benefit, and that's what we need to be looking for. And this is an example, from Cork County Council where, we have the grasscrete or the honeycomb with the grafts. Here's another one here from Wexford. Again, put together by Wexford County Council again, so we can be looking at these kind of technologies. It's not rocket science, and not everybody walks and still at us. That's one of the reasons why they don't seem to like them. So filler strips, this long N24, a lot of these photographs, incidentally, I just took my bicycle. We're struggling to get good examples of nature-based SuDS in Ireland at the moment. So if you have examples, we are looking for them. And we're running an event with Engineers Ireland on the 13th of October, and we're looking for good case studies. So if you know of any, let us know, please. But again, these are simple ones here, for pollinators, but in fact, they're intercepting rain as well. And some of these, if they're big enough in scale, they will provide benefits to biodiversity and nature, etc. Now, we can get a bit more creative, and this is where we're trying to go in terms of engineering the stuff. So it's one thing to plant a few trees and a few flowers. It's another thing to actually start filtering out the water and managing it so that it's of benefit to the engineers and a benefit to biodiversity. So this is a rain garden. This is a schematic of a typical rain garden. As you can see here, not in Ireland. I struggle to get any in Ireland. We are trying to build them. But see what happens to the water. The water goes in, and then it percolates through the rain garden. This is one from Wales, and this is what one being constructed looks like. So you can design them whatever way you want, but the point is you've got to build them in, and you've got to build them in as part of the drainage network. Okay, this is an off-street rain garden. This is actually in the church, St. Peter and Paul's Church in Clonmel, and again, it's providing pollinator benefits as well. So how are we doing time? Okay, great. So. Right, here's an example back in Wexford again. This is actually a community group put this together, funded through, I think it was through the Leader and maybe the RS program, I'm not sure, with Wexford County Council. So very simple there. You can see the car park to the right, it's gravel. And then if you look closely there, you can see the arrow there. So that's a swale to the left. That's taking the water from the car park, right? So that's a good thing. In terms of managing the water, and that's going to be done anywhere. So I'd argue that all sites anywhere in Ireland should be using this technology, especially if you've got high status water bodies, or if you've got pearl mussels. Again, all these areas, we don't want these kind of toxins to be getting in on these very sensitive receptors. This is again the Wexford Park. My apologies about the photograph. I've used it so many times. It's actually got old. You can see here the swales, wildflower meadows. This is in the park again. Building in that biodiversity element as well. So from an amenity point of view, a bit of signage there is always good to let people know what's going on, because these aren't always pretty. They can be quite ugly in autumn, so it's important we do that. And then scale, think about scale. So again, back in Clonmel, here the rivers allowed flood out into the park. So multifunctional use, the park is used during the dry spells, and then when the river needs to flood, it floods out. And we know that when fish have access to the floodplain, they grow bigger. Is part of the natural process. Rivers naturally flood and expand on the floodplains and then go back. So if everything's locked into an embankment, well then the fish can't thrive. So it is important to think about that. That brings me on to the planning for watercourses in the urban environment. Fisheries developed this. I would have worked with colleagues of mine back in the day, and in fact this was inspired by the River Groody, which is not too far from here. River Groody, fantastic little small river, which over time has come under pressure. But the idea here, and I recommend everybody have a look at this, anybody involved in planning, anybody with an interest in their local rivers should look at this, because it's a really important, in my view, a document in that it sets out how you can protect the ecology of the river or the water body, and also builds in your human uses as well in terms of your nature-based SuDS, running your water off your developments, whatever, into wetlands, etc., but also have a middle zone for your active travel, for your recreational trails. Blue waste, green waste, etc., and then building your human benefits. So how can local authorities address the biodiversity emergency? And this is where, I suppose, where I am with my job and my colleagues, and this is what we're trying to do. It's a bit of a mission to try and move on this. A lot of our focus has been on agriculture and on forestry, and we are trying to now move in the urban space, and I think there are opportunities. We ran a webinar specifically for practitioners in this field, engineers, planners. We did with our IPI and Engineers Ireland back in 2020, where we had a series of presentations around all this stuff, and then we asked a series of questions in the poll. We had over 500 people attend. We were actually blown away with the interest from the sector. And you can see where biodiversity sits there. They all agreed it's important, but the challenge is to try and get the stuff in there. So everything from, policy, legislation, leadership, governance, etc., etc. So there's a whole challenge that's ahead of us to do this. So we've been doing this. We've been engaging with the Department of Housing have launched an implementation strategy, which I'm involved in, and we've been engaging with everybody from TA, NTA, national parks, fisheries, the whole shebang, to try and pull this in and try and make sure it's a multi-dimensional approach. Running a whole load of webinars on this to try and make sure that we hit the right sectors, including the URDF, the RDF. Okay. 1 minute. Oh, gee, sorry. So we are listening. We're working with other groups in the Region Assembly in terms of guidance. Big thing is outdoor recreational, URDF, RRDF. We can build these things in now. A lot of money's been spent, 350 million on active travel this year alone. The URDF, I think it's about 1.2 billion. Massive money's been spent, and that's the time to try and build it in. So, in terms of what we should be doing, we should be looking at water in terms of spatial planning. I won't read that. You can look at the presentation later if you're interested. And then some practical tips. Look for the opportunities. So here's an example of some green and blue infrastructure, or green infrastructure, which is not providing any water benefit, okay? The gully is beside the green. It's lovely, lovely green, but there's water is not going anywhere. Again, you can see there's a separation there. What we really need to do is integrating this stuff. You could have a rain garden there, taking the water in and back out. Here's an example from Wexford, car park, 3 pits. Again, lovely job. Except that rainwater, when it rains, you can see in the next slide, is flowing in the other direction. So again, no treatment. Well, those things can provide treatment if they're designed into program planned. Here's an example where 3 pits have gone in with the functionality, purpose of dealing with the water. This is where it works well. If you look closely at that photograph, you can see to the right it's drier than to the left, so the water's going in, it's working nicely. Here's the next 3 pit right beside it. And you can see the water's flowing past because the elevation is wrong. So we have to make sure that the construction is right as well as getting them in there. So there's a bit of learning here for all of us. And maybe if there's less smoking, it'd be less of a problem there. That's the close-up. You can see where the water is. An example here from Waterford, a car park before the designing in the nature-based stuff, so hard surfaces. Now the same car park being planned with your grasscrete, with your swales, with your nature-based stuff in there. So what we are talking about here is we are working through this. We're working with the different agencies, Irish Water. We're working with DMOORs, which is the manual that engineers use in terms of designing streets and so on. And we are actually linking in with the different funding schemes to try and map out where everything is. What about communities? Yes, there's a role for communities, tidy towns, Lions clubs, etc. Here's an example of tidy towns putting in a rain garden in Offaly, and you can see here the ingress and the egress. Lovely project, and they have them there planting the irises. Then in Duhallow, where I used to work years ago, this is a lovely example. I'll be finishing up with this. Designing for biodiversity, again, we can scale this up, so we should be thinking small and big. So, you know, first year that those ponds went in, they went in as treatment systems for runoff from pitching pod courses. We had our damsel flies. Next year, the dragonflies came in. And then this year, smoothing out. And I was talking to Michael Morris, he's there, Michael, just tells me that every year frogs spawn in that. So you can see there's, you know, these are providing biodiversity benefits if they're designed with biodiversity in mind, and that's where we need to go. Public engagement, we have to do this with the public engagement, get the buy-in. It's really important. So we have been working with the Lions clubs with a view to try and roll this stuff out, and also I'm supposed to be working with Una and TII in this, I'm the weak link there, to get a guidance out of this stuff here. Finally, before I finish, I feel I need to mention this. Now, maybe Bernie will mention it tomorrow. Greenways and blueways, we are concerned in terms of greenways and blueways from a nature-based management point of view, but I would also be concerned in terms of biodiversity management in general, in terms of where some of these are going. So we need to plan these things right in terms of their proximity, particularly for SACs and that, and their design. So that's a conference for another day. Finally, just to bring it back, we need to think about this in a holistic way. Where's rain falling, and then build it out, and then look for your stuff. So my conclusion is, you know, we need to start following best practice here. Follow what's happening in the Netherlands, you know, and be thinking about, you know, biodiversity, but also water. It underpins everything. Without water, you can't do it. And these things will be self-watering if you do it that way. There's lots of opportunities. Now, we've lots of materials here if you're interested in this. We have webinars, recordings on our website. I'm very happy to chat to anybody who's interested in this stuff. But we need to crack on with it. We need to get on with it. So anybody in local authorities, please talk to your colleagues. We need to get this stuff moving. There's lots of projects that are happening. Get the stuff in early. And give me a shout, and I can give you some advice on it. Cheers. Okay.